It's dark. Like, really dark. Not the kind of mood lighting you'd find in a cafe where people pretend to read poetry. No, this is pre-dawn medieval dark. And you? You're a potter. Not a wizard. Just a potter. Congratulations. It's the year 1372. You live in a small English village that smells like warm turnips and generational sadness. You are about to begin another thrilling day of shaping mud into cups. It is as exciting as it sounds. The rooster crows. Not because it likes you. Just because it does that. Every single morning. You groan. Your back hurts because, well, mattresses haven't been invented yet. What you sleep on is more like a bag of straw that's been personally insulted by time and mice. You sit up and a flea skitters across your collarbone. That's Gerald. He's lived here longer than you have. The room is cold. Always cold. It's a one-room cottage with a thatched roof, which is a romantic way of saying, full of holes. There's no central heating, no heated blankets, no cozy cottagecore aesthetic. Just the smell of damp wool, cabbage stew from 2 nights ago, and something that may or may not be your own feet. Your bed is close to the fireplace, which hasn't been lit yet. So congratulations, your nose is now the coldest thing in the village. So before you get too comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world, especially since you, right now, are in a medieval pit of muddy despair. You reach for your tunic, which is the same one you wore yesterday, and the day before. Laundry isn't exactly a priority when the river freezes over and your only soap is lard and lies. You pull on your woolen hose, which have a suspicious crust to them, and slip your feet into leather shoes that have absolutely no arch support because medieval footwear designers didn't believe in comfort. Or toes, apparently. There's no breakfast waiting for you. No fridge, no granola, and definitely no espresso. What you have is a hunk of coarse brown bread that could double as a building material. You gnaw on it thoughtfully, wondering if your molars will survive another winter. The bread tastes like, well, like someone tried to bake a sponge using sand and regret. You wash it down with a ladle of cold water from a clay jug you made yourself. It's chipped. Because of course it is. The fire needs to be lit, but the kindling is damp because everything is damp. Always. Even your dreams are damp. You manage to coax a few stubborn flames into the hearth using last week's fish bones and a prayer to Saint Zita, patron saint of domestic workers and people who cry while sweeping. The room fills with smoke. Not in a charming, woodsy way, more in a your lungs are now crying way. The chimney is just a hole in the wall, and the draft is so strong it might just take your soul with it. The smoke seeps into your clothes, your pores, your sense of identity. You'll be smelling like medieval campfire until next harvest. Time to begin your day's work. The sun is beginning to rise, slowly, as if it's not thrilled to be here either. Outside, the village is coming to life in the sense that things are now moving and making noise, even though none of it sounds particularly alive. Someone's yelling at a pig. Someone else is coughing in Latin. A child is crying, probably about soup. You head out to your workshop, which is a generous term for shed made of mud and forgotten dreams. It's attached to your cottage, though the only thing holding the two together is mutual disdain. Inside, it's dark, cold, and cluttered with broken pots, wood shavings, and the faint aroma of mildew and effort. Your wheel waits for you in the corner. Not an electric wheel. No, this is the medieval version, which means it's foot-powered and utterly unforgiving. It looks like something you'd use in a Renaissance torture chamber, and honestly, some days it feels like that. You sit down, your joints popping like stale barley crackers, and begin to spin. Clay. Ah yes, clay. The sacred mud. You've got a heap of it waiting in a barrel, collected from the riverbank, sifted by hand, and full of organic surprises. Sometimes it includes twigs. Sometimes bones. Occasionally a frog. It's never boring. Well, except it is. But also not. You grab a lump, slam it on the wheel, and begin the hypnotic, slow process of shaping it. Your hands are cold and cracked. The clay is colder. But as you work, it starts to warm. You press, spin, lift, and shape, creating something vaguely bowl-shaped, which is good enough for this century. Perfection isn't expected. Just won't leak when filled with porridge is fine. The sound of the wheel spinning is oddly soothing, rhythmic, almost meditative. If you ignore the fact that your knees are screaming and your lower back has filed for divorce, you spend the next few hours repeating this process. Lump after lump, bowl after bowl, occasionally a jug, maybe even a chamber pot if you're feeling fancy. Chamber pots are oddly lucrative. Everyone needs one. Nobody wants to think about what they're for. You make them with quiet dignity, even though they're basically medieval toilets you carry around. Art, really? Mid-morning arrives, or at least what you assume is mid-morning, based on the quality of sunlight and your increasing hunger. Time for a break. Not a long one. Just enough to chew on some dried beans and stare blankly at a chicken that wandered into your yard. The chicken stares back, judging you silently. It knows you're not going anywhere in life. But that's okay. Neither is it. Your neighbor, Jeffrey, passes by. He's a cooper. Makes barrels. Talks too much about barrels. Always smells like tree sap and regret. He nods at you. You nod back. That's your daily social interaction quota filled. Congratulations. You are now emotionally exhausted. Back to work. You check on yesterday's pieces, which have been left out to dry. Some have cracked because of a cold. Others were chewed on by goats. You sigh and move on. Failure is part of the process. Also the outcome. You repair what you can, patch the rest, and mutter quiet curses in Middle English. Now it's time to fire some of your creations. This is the exciting part. By exciting, we mean dangerous and time-consuming. Your kiln is outside. It looks like a small earth oven that someone buried halfway in the ground and then gave up on. It's fueled by wood, which you have to chop, stack, dry, and carry. Because nothing in this life is easy. Not even heat. You load the kiln with your dried pots, carefully stacking them so they don't explode. You light the fire, using kindling and your dwindling optimism. It takes hours to reach proper firing temperature, during which you do what any sensible person would. Sit nearby and stare at it while coughing into your sleeve. During this time, you carve designs into other pieces. Nothing fancy, just lines, swirls, maybe a crude fish if you're feeling artistic. Most people can't read, so decoration is less about messages and more about, this pot looks vaguely interesting, I'll take it. You spend your afternoon alternating between carving, shaping, loading, and waiting. There's always waiting. Always a thin film of boredom coated in soot. The sun moves across the sky like a reluctant postal worker. Eventually it's late afternoon, which means you should probably think about dinner. Dinner is another hunk of bread. Maybe a scrap of onion. If you're lucky, there's a bit of cheese that hasn't completely given up on existing. You chew slowly. Not because you're savoring it, but because your jaw hurts from earlier and your teeth are already halfway to retirement. As the sun begins to set, the village grows quieter. The chickens go home. The goats settle down. Jeffrey finally stops talking about barrels. You check the kiln. The pots are glowing faintly inside. That's good. They haven't shattered. Yet. You leave them to cool overnight, because reaching in now would be a great way to ruin your hands and your week. You go back inside. Your cottage is slightly warmer than it was this morning, which means it's now miserably cozy. You lie down on your straw mattress, which pokes you lovingly in 7 different places. You pull a woolen blanket over yourself and stare at the rafters. There's no Netflix, no podcasts, no books unless you stole one from the monastery, in which case congratulations, you're going to medieval jail. Your entertainment is listening to the wind whistle through the cracks in your wall and wondering whether that creak was the roof or the rat again. You close your eyes. You're tired. Every bone in your body is singing a song of weariness and domestic pottery. Tomorrow will be exactly the same, and the day after that, and the one after that, because you, my friend, are a medieval potter. Not a lord, not a knight, not a monk. Just a person who spends their entire life shaping earth into vessels for other people's soup. And somehow, that's kind of beautiful. In a tragic, muddy, wrist-aching sort of way. Sleep well. Morning again. Not that you'd call it that. It's still dark when you wake up, and for a moment, you're not sure whether it's today or just yesterday wearing a different cloak. The rooster hasn't even started screaming yet, which means you have approximately 4.5 seconds of peace before he does. And yes, right on cue, there it is. That ungodly screech, like a trumpet made of feathers and vengeance. Your eyes open slowly. Your face is pressed into your straw mattress. The straw has somehow gained even more sharp edges overnight, and your cheek is now embossed with an accidental hay tattoo. It itches. You consider turning over. You do not. Your limbs ache with the sweet burn of mediocre manual labor. It's a very specific soreness, like your body is trying to politely let you know that it's had enough of this artisanal clay nightmare. You eventually sit up, bones clicking like loose tiles in a neglected roof. You stretch your arms, which results in exactly one pop and a new kink in your spine that wasn't there yesterday. Your blanket slides off and you're hit with the usual cold air, sharp, moist, and full of betrayal. Your breath clouds in front of you. It's a new day. Another chance to gloriously repeat every single thing you did yesterday, only slightly worse. You reach down to find your shoes. Gerald the flea is still alive and well. He's now brought friends. Your left foot has a mild rash and the start of a poem written in flea bites. A real collaborative effort. You slide your feet into the same stiff, soul-erasing leather shoes. The left one is still damp from yesterday. Why? No one knows. It just is. You stand up, walk 2 steps to the fireplace, and examine the ash from last night. It's cold. Like your ambition. You poke it half-heartedly with an iron rod you call a poker, but which could also qualify as old stick with commitment issues. You attempt to revive the embers, but they're as dead as your career prospects. So you start over, again. You build a fire with shreds of last week's wool scraps and a few cursed twigs. Your flint and steel spark only after 17 increasingly aggressive strikes. You finally get a flame, blow on it like you're whispering secrets to a squirrel, and eventually, blessed warmth. A small, smoky reminder that you haven't completely failed at everything today. Breakfast? You know better by now. Today it's more of that brown bread, only stale. It now requires pre-soaking in lukewarm broth to be considered chewable. You chew slowly, reflectively. Your jaw clicks. That's probably fine. You step outside. The village is already beginning its sad, groaning choreography of survival. The air smells like smoke, cabbage, wet wool, and something rotting that no one has investigated because, honestly, it's probably just old Marjorie's compost pile again. Children are chasing a goat. The goat is winning. A blacksmith's hammer clinks rhythmically in the distance. Church bells toll once, because it's always once. Just enough to annoy you but not enough to tell you what time it actually is. You make your way to your workshop. A few shards of pottery litter the path from yesterday's firing. A chicken has decided to lay an egg next to your wheel. You admire her confidence. She stares at you like you owe her something. You do not. Inside the workshop, the cold hits you again. Stone walls and a dirt floor. Dampness curls up from the ground like medieval air conditioning. You exhale loudly. Not because you're trying to make a point. It just escapes. Along with your will to live. You check on the kiln first. It's still warm. A good sign. You remove the pots one by one, inspecting them like a disappointed parent. One bowl is cracked. Another has collapsed slightly in on itself, giving it a charming "what even is this?" aesthetic. One jug is perfect. Well, perfect by 14th century standards, which is to say it holds liquid and hasn't exploded. That's enough to bring a flicker of joy to your exhausted face. You line the finished pieces on a wooden shelf. They'll go to the market in a few days, assuming you don't accidentally knock them all over first, like last month. You try not to think about it. The shards still haunt the corner of the workshop, like pottery ghosts whispering, "Remember your failure." You settle onto your stool, stretch your legs around the wheel, and begin again. You slam down a fresh hunk of clay with the enthusiasm of a monk writing his 14th consecutive "Dear God, please fix this" prayer. Your fingers sink into the cold mass. It resists at first, then yields, like every miserable lump of river mud should. Spin. Wet your hands. Press. Center. Shape. The cycle continues, unbroken. You become the machine. Except the machine wheezes, sighs, and occasionally curses when the clay flops over like a disappointed pudding. Around mid-morning, your apprentice arrives. He's 12, slightly sticky, and named Simon. No one knows why he's always sticky. He doesn't know either. He walks in chewing something that may or may not be food. You give him a nod. He responds by tripping over a log and dropping his sack of kindling. "Morning, master," he mumbles, face first in the dirt. You grunt in reply. That's medieval for "it's fine, get up before you become a root vegetable." Simon's job is to gather wood, help wedge clay, and generally be in the way while pretending he's learning. You give him a few broken pots to grind into grog. Grog, by the way, is not a festive drink. It's crushed ceramic bits you mix into clay so it doesn't explode in the kiln. Like ancient Tupperware padding, Simon starts grinding with a rock, humming the same off-key tune he hums every single day. You envy his youthful optimism. Then you remember he has to do this for the next 40 years, and it softens your envy a little. As the day warms up, and by warm, we mean barely above freezing, you get into a rhythm. 1 pot, 2 pots, a plate, something vaguely vase-like. You mess up the next one, toss it aside, and start over. It's fine. Everything is fine. You have accepted the slow erosion of your creativity. Now it's just shapes, vessels, containers for food you can't afford, and ale you never get to drink. Lunch is forgettable. A root vegetable of indeterminate species. Boiled. No salt. Salt is expensive, and you traded your last bit for a new throwing stick. It's a good stick. It has a knot in the middle that makes you feel like someone, somewhere, once cared about craftsmanship. Simon eats with you. He tells you about a goose that chased a baker through the town square yesterday. You chuckle once, quietly. The image of a goose with vengeance in its eyes is oddly satisfying. You finish your meal, which takes exactly 4 minutes, and return to work. Because what else is there? In the afternoon, you do repairs. A merchant has brought in a cracked amphora that once held olive oil. Olive oil. Fancy. Someone's doing well. You try not to resent it. You patch the crack with a mixture of slip and prayer. It might hold. It might not. You charge 2 pennies and tell him it's mostly sound. He grumbles. You nod. That's the transaction. A traveling tinker stops by. He tries to sell you a knife that is definitely stolen. You trade a chip bowl for it, because your current knife is more rust than blade. The tinker tells you he's headed to Norwich. You've never been. You nod as if that means something. He leaves. You go back to stirring clay. The sun begins to sink, casting a golden glow over the village, which does absolutely nothing to distract from the smell of wet dog and boiled cabbage now wafting across the fields. You put your tools away, carefully, reverently. You sweep the floor of your workshop, even though it never actually looks clean, just less grim. You and Simon carry a few finished pots into the storage shed. He drops one. It shatters. You don't yell. You just stare at it, blinking slowly. Then you hand him a broom. He says sorry. You say, at least it wasn't a chamber pot. This is considered comedy. Simon heads home. You sit in the doorway of your workshop, watching the sun vanish behind the trees. You're tired, but not the good kind. Not that I built a cathedral today tired. More that I made 14 mugs no one will appreciate kind of tired. You eat dinner alone. Bread. A sliver of salted fish that tastes like salted disappointment. You chew slowly. The fire crackles behind you. It's peaceful. In the same way that the inside of a tomb is peaceful. You crawl into bed. Gerald the flea has brought a date. She's already nesting in your left armpit. The straw pokes you. The cold creeps in. You close your eyes. You dream of making the perfect jug. One that doesn't crack. One that people admire. Then the dream fades and you're back to spinning mud in the dark. And still, tomorrow, you'll do it all again. Because that's what potters do. You wake up to the sound of something chewing. You're not sure what or why, but it's definitely chewing. Loud, deliberate chewing. A rhythmic, wet crunching sound that could only mean one of 3 things. A goat has broken into your hut again. The rats have found your stash of dried onions, or something far more cursed is happening. You open one eye. It's the goat. Again. Of course. It's eating your door. You sigh. Just another Tuesday in 1347. You lurch upright like a marionette with a hangover. The smell of damp wool greets you like an overly affectionate relative. The air inside your tiny one-room cottage is thick with smoke, mildew, and the fragrant aroma of goat breath. You swat at the air uselessly and throw your blanket, a term here meaning ragged sackovich, off your legs. It clings for a moment, reluctant to let you go. Your knees crack. Your hip pops. Your spine audibly files a complaint. Welcome to the daily body horror of life in the Middle Ages. The goat makes eye contact. It doesn't stop chewing. You open the door, or rather, what's left of it, and guide the goat out with your foot and a very stern whisper. You've stopped yelling at it. Yelling implies hope, and you left hope behind sometime during last year's particularly wet winter. You glance at the sky. It's the color of pewter and regret. There's no sun, but the birds are awake and screaming. A rooster crows from somewhere down the lane. You make a mental note to find it and have a long conversation about volume control. With a shovel, you shuffle to your water basin. It's already half frozen. Wonderful. You splash your face anyway. The water hits like betrayal. It tastes like moss and yesterday's thunderstorm. But it's cold enough to remind you that you're alive and just barely young enough to care. Then it's time for the fire. Always the fire. Your hearth is your lifeline, your stove, your kiln warmer, and your very expensive candle. You poke the ashes with a stick. Nothing. You blow gently. Still nothing. You try again, using the breath of a man who's eaten nothing but onions and barley for 17 years. A tiny ember winks at you from beneath the charred remains of yesterday's dreams. You coax it into flame using twigs, kindling, and what's left of your patience. Eventually, it roars to life, a flickering orange reminder that combustion is your only consistent friend. You toast a stale lump of barley bread over the fire. It doesn't improve. You chew slowly, staring into the flames like you're auditioning for a very low-budget Norse epic. Your breakfast tastes like sand and surrender. So before we get too far into your artisan anguish, now's a good time to like the video and subscribe. But only if you're into this sort of slow, immersive dive into historical disappointment. And leave a comment letting me know where in the world you're watching from and what time it is where you are. I love knowing who else is staying up at 3 a.m. learning about medieval pottery and goat invasions. Now fed, technically, you step outside. The village is waking up. Slowly. Grudgingly. A haze of smoke rises from nearby chimneys, mixing with the mist to create the full medieval atmosphere, part ghost story, part lung infection. Children run by screaming, as if chased by Satan himself. You assume it's a game. Probably. Marjorie, the weaver's wife, is hanging out her laundry and giving you the look again. The one that says, "I'm not judging you, but your shoes are on the wrong feet, and I can smell your entire lifestyle for here." You nod politely and pretend to be late for something. You're not. But it's easier than explaining your entire existence. You head to the workshop. Your sanctuary. Your muddy, splinter-infested, slightly collapsing sanctuary. You open the shutters to let in the gray morning light. Dust motes dance like tiny regrets. The smell of clay, smoke, and charred wood hits you like a memory. This is your domain. Your empire of pots. A kingdom of cups. On the shelves, plates, bowls, and a suspiciously cracked jug you're pretending is aesthetic. On the table, tools, some wire, a lump of half-wedge clay, and an old chicken feather you use for something. You've forgotten what. Probably dusting. Or tickling the kiln when it's sad. Your hands are already dry and cracked, so you spit in them and knead your first lump of clay for the day. It squelches in a way that's both satisfying and slightly disgusting, like massaging a cold toad. Today is a throwing day. That means shaping, spinning, praying the wheel doesn't betray you. You settle in, foot on the lower wheel, upper wheel waiting for the offering of clay. You begin to kick. The wheel spins. You center your clay. You fail. You try again. And again. Centering is the part that makes or breaks a pot. Get it wrong, and your cup becomes modern art. Get it right, and you still have to hope it doesn't explode in the kiln later. The stakes are low and simultaneously crushing. You form a small bowl. It's decent, functional, a little wobbly. You tell yourself it has character. You make another, slightly larger. This one collapses. You make a face like someone just insulted your mother's soup. Then you try a jug. Big project. Ambitious. It spins. It rises. It leans slightly left. You sigh. You whisper to it. You beg it to behave. You finish it anyway. Simon arrives sometime around mid-morning, carrying what he claims is a new glazing pigment. It's mud. Just very specific mud. You nod solemnly, as if he's brought the philosopher's stone. Encouragement is cheaper than apprentices. You set him to wedging while you check the kiln. It's still warm from yesterday's firing. The ashes glow faintly, like a dying hope. You reach in with the confidence of someone who's already accepted burnt fingers as part of the job. You retrieve 3 bowls and a cracked candlestick. One bowl is perfect. One is decent. One looks like it was made by a particularly bitter goblin. You arrange them on the shelf for cooling. Simon breaks the handle off a mug. You inhale through your nose. Try again, you say, through gritted teeth. He nods, solemn and wide-eyed, like a sheep who's just realized it's at a butcher convention. Midday comes, again announced by Ed the human sundial shouting it's time from his porch. A few bells ring from the church, out of sync and vaguely threatening. Lunch is a leek, a heel of bread, and a lukewarm beer that tastes like sadness. You drink it anyway. The afternoon is spent on repairs. Your roof leaks. Your door is half-goat now. The back wall of the workshop is leaning like it's trying to escape. You patch it with daub and twine and 3 whisper prayers to Saint Spiridon, patron of potters. You've memorized his prayer. You recite it like a mun praying not for divine intervention, but just 5 minutes of peace. Simon cuts his finger on a shard of bisqueware. He bleeds dramatically. You wrap it in cloth and tell him he's lucky. Now you're a real potter, you say. All great craftsmen are missing parts of their hands. He turns pale. You chuckle softly and go back to trimming. Evening approaches. The light dims. The mist returns. The kiln must be fired. You begin the process, stacking wood, checking airflow, arranging the day's pieces inside like the world's worst jigsaw puzzle. You light it. The flames catch. Smoke rises. The warmth soaks into your bones like kindness. Simon watches, wide-eyed. You tell him to go home. He hesitates, then leaves. You sit by the kiln, alone, as always, watching the fire dance, listening to the crackling of logs and the faint whistle of escaping steam. You think about nothing. You think about everything. You remember your father's hands shaping clay. You remember your mother's voice humming as she scrubbed soot from your tunic. You remember your first pot, still sitting on the shelf, crooked and cracked and beautiful. Night falls fully. The kiln glows. The stars blink through clouds. And you, potter of this tiny damp corner of the world, sit in your workshop, covered in dust and dreams. You close your eyes. And for a moment, you rest. You dream of fire. Again, you're not being poetic. You actually dream of fire. Not metaphors. Not romance. Just a very literal dream of sitting beside your kiln, staring at flames, while a goose slowly catches fire in the background and no one does anything about it. When you wake up, there is no goose. But there is fire. Still smoldering. Still going. You blink. Your brain is slower than usual, impressive, given the already snail-paced crawl of your medieval cognition. You roll off your straw mattress and directly onto the floor, which feels wet because it is. Welcome to medieval insulation, where moisture is a personality trait. Your bones make that familiar cereal crunching sound as you stand. Your body is trying to warn you. About what? You're not sure. Possibly everything. You rub your eyes with the corner of a blanket that smells like vinegar and wool anxiety. Then, breakfast. Today's gourmet feast includes 1. Stale barley cake. A pinch of salt, if you remembered to steal it from the market. A small chunk of yesterday's turnip. And a cup of something that might have once been beer, but is now just lukewarm regrets. You chew slowly, reflectively, like a mun who has given up on texture. Then comes the most important part of the day, checking the kiln. It's cooled just enough for you to peek inside, without losing your eyebrows. You kneel down. You open the firebrick door, like you're revealing treasure. Inside, the pottery you fired yesterday. Now is the moment of truth. Like Christmas morning, if Santa only brought you anxiety and cracked stoneware. The first piece is a jug. Still intact. Glaze didn't bubble. Handle survived. It's good. Suspiciously good. You're deeply unsettled. The second bowl has a small fissure down the side. You run your finger along it. Smooth. Aesthetic, maybe? You immediately convince yourself it's part of the design. Intentional, you mutter. rustic. The third is completely ruined, warped like a cursed pancake. You hold it up, squint, and decide it will make an excellent flower pot. You don't grow flowers, but that's irrelevant. You extract the rest, hands scorched to the consistency of old leather. A few wins, mostly acceptable losses, and one inexplicable sculpture that Simon freestyled when he thought you weren't looking. It's abstract. You pretend to be proud of him. You're not. But it's the kind of parental deception that keeps apprentices obedient. Now it's time for glazing. Yes, glazing, the ancient, maddening process of trying to coat your pots in minerals, ash, and mud so they come out shiny instead of just clay-colored sadness. Your glaze options are limited. Here's what's in your palette. Iron oxide, 4 red tones aka rust in a bowl. Ash glaze, wood ashes mixed with despair. Salt glaze, incredibly dangerous, but shiny. Lead-based yellow, guaranteed to give you a little extra glow over the years. Simon is helping you stir the ash glaze vat. He's splashing it everywhere. His face is now mostly minerals. You dunk a mug into the grayish, lumpy sludge. The clay groans, metaphorically. The glaze coats it like gravy. You place it gently on the rack to dry, praying to every saint, pagan god, and celestial alignment that it won't blister or bubble or develop a weird pockmark like last time. You glance at the shelves. You have roughly 30 items drying, waiting to be fired again. You consider taking them all and hurling them into the river just to feel something. But no. You are a professional. A professional potter in 1347, which is just a fancy way of saying mud wizard who smells like burnt moss. You spend the next few hours shaping more pieces. Plates, mugs, bowls, and one experimental bottle that you will absolutely never sell, but which gives you the illusion of artistic growth. You center the clay on your wheel. You kick the wheel like a medieval Pele. You shape with fingers that are more callous than skin. You zone out. You're not really here anymore. Your mind drifts somewhere beyond the walls of your workshop. You wonder if they have better clay in France. Or at least better beer. Probably not. Suddenly, a shadow darkens your doorway. It's Gerald. Of course. Gerald the blacksmith, local extrovert and conversational war crime, is here to chat. You brace yourself. "Hello there," he booms, stepping into your shop like he owns it. "How's the mud?" "Still muddy," you reply. He laughs. Loudly. Like you told a joke. You didn't. He picks up one of your mugs without asking. He flips it upside down. You wince. Bit thin on the lip, in it? You consider throwing a brick at him. But alas, bricks are valuable. He eventually leaves, not before knocking over a plate, which you just finished trimming. You scream internally. Externally, you smile like a hostage. You return to work. The afternoon fades into evening. The light through your window turns from dim misery to golden despair. The wind picks up, carrying the scent of manure, wood smoke, and something faintly herbal. Someone's cooking cabbage again. Dinner is, surprise, barley mush. You eat it standing up. You're too tired to sit. Or maybe you just can't face the bench again after what it did to your spine yesterday. You spend an hour organizing your shelves. You tell yourself it's productive. In reality, you're just delaying sleep because dreams are weird and the bed smells like mildew and existentialism. You light a tallow candle. The flame flickers. You write your mark, your little potter signature, on the bottom of 6 new bowls. The symbol is simple, a curved line and 2 dots. No one will know it's yours. But you will. Simon asks if potters ever get famous. You look at him for a long time. Then say, no. He nods. Do you want to be? He asks. You pause. Then say, also no. And it's true. You don't want fame. You just want a cup that doesn't explode. You just want 1 week without rain. You just want a roof that doesn't whistle when the wind hits it sideways. You just want quiet. And maybe, someday, to trade one of your jugs for something exotic and ludicrous, like a whole chicken or a block of cheese not shaped like a triangle. Night falls. You put out the candle. The fire is still warm. You settle on your itchy pile of damp hay, staring at the roof. The goat, mercifully, is asleep. You try to sleep too, but the dreams come anyway. This time, the goose does catch fire. And Gerald applauds. You wake up groaning. And tomorrow, it begins again. You wake up not because you're rested, but because a chicken walked across your face. You're not surprised. In fact, you're impressed. Chickens don't usually wait until sunrise. This one showed restraint. She gets a mental gold star and is promoted to slightly less loathsome bird of the month. You groan as you sit up. Your spine sounds like someone playing a maraca made entirely of regrets. Your mattress, which is really just a pile of straw, mold, and mouse-related tension, clings to your body like an emotionally needy ex. Today's weather, damp, with a chance of more damp. Your roof has done its best, which isn't much. The walls weep gently. Or maybe that's you. You reach for your boots. They are wet. Of course they are. They are always wet. You no longer remember what dry feels like. Somewhere out there, rich nobles are sleeping on dry linen sheets with feather pillows and no fungal foot infections. But not you. You get medieval podiatric roulette. Breakfast is, let's call it minimalist. It's a half turnip. Raw. Not even salted. You chew thoughtfully, gazing at your workshop. Clay scraps. Firewood. A wheel that creaks when you so much as look at it. The ghost of a plate that cracked in half yesterday still lingers on the floor, mocking you with its asymmetrical demise. Simon is already awake. He's outside, kicking a stone like it owes him money. His youthful enthusiasm is still intact, which is irritating. You don't say anything. You just glare from the window like a Dickensian landlord. You head out back to your woodpile. It is, you guessed it, soggy. You sigh. Again. You sigh so often now that it's basically a second language. You grab what you can, cart it back to the kiln, and begin the gentle art of relighting yesterday's barely dead embers. This takes time, and breath, and swearing. Eventually, the fire catches. The flames curl upward like angry orange worms. You warm your hands over the blaze and watch the heat ripple through the morning air. There's something meditative about it, something ancient. And by ancient, we mean you do this every single morning like a clay-based Groundhog Day. Once the fire's going, you move on to your drying shelf. Time to inspect yesterday's glaze work. Here's what you find. 2 cups with promising shine. Could pass for professional. You feel suspicious and vaguely proud. 1 bowl with glazed drick. That's where it pooled too much and formed a hardened glob on one side. It now resembles a ceramic tumor. You consider chiseling it off, but remember what happened last time. You still have the scar. A jug that somehow exploded before firing. No one knows how. You blame Simon, whether it's fair or not. Speaking of Simon, he appears in the doorway, holding a lump of clay shaped vaguely like a rabbit, or possibly a very distressed loaf of bread. You nod approvingly. It's not great, but at least it didn't explode. You spend the next few hours at the wheel. Kick. Shape. Smooth. Repeat. You've entered the zen-like trance known only to potters and people stuck in particularly dull meetings. Your hands are coated in a mixture of clay, sweat, and ambition. The clay hums as it spins. Not literally, but you're tired enough to imagine it. Outside, the village stirs. A bell rings in the distance. The market is open. You won't go. Markets mean people. And talking. And pretending your plates are charming instead of mildly warped. No thanks. Instead, you keep shaping. You're working on a special order today, a full set of 6 bowls for the baker's niece's wedding. The bride requested floral patterns. You are doing your best, which, in pottery terms, means scratching slightly leaf-shaped things into wet mud and hoping for divine intervention. Simon asks if you ever made something truly perfect. You stop. Think. Say, no. He asks, not even once. You shake your head. No such thing as perfect clay. Only clay that hasn't failed yet. Simon nods like you've just imparted deep wisdom. In truth, you're just tired and possibly dehydrated. But he scribbles it down in a little book he carries. He's adorable. Annoying, but adorable. Around midday, a customer arrives. You hate this part. Her name is Beatrix. She's from the next village over, wears fancy shoes made of actual leather, and smells like someone who bathes more than twice a season. Suspicious. She wants a set of jugs. You show her your best. She pokes them like she's checking for ripeness. This one's heavy, she says. Yes, you reply. This one's uneven. It's handmade, you say, deadpan. She frowns. I'll take the heavy one. Of course she will. You wrap it in straw and pass it to her. She pays with 3 silver pennies and an onion. The medieval economy is, to put it kindly, whimsical. You wave goodbye, then immediately mutter something unpleasant under your breath, because she knocked over another cup on her way out. You are losing inventory at a rate previously only seen in Viking raids. Lunchtime. You eat the onion. No, really. Just raw onion. Your eyes water. Not just from the sulfuric acids, but from emotion. The emotion is despair. Simon offers to share his crust of bread. You pretend to refuse, then take half anyway. You chew in silence, staring at a pot that has once again developed a hairline crack while drying. You whisper to it. You traitor. Afternoon comes. The sun shifts. Your shadow gets longer. So does the list of pots you still need to trim. Trimming, the part where you take half-finished clay and remove just enough from the bottom, so it looks refined instead of shaped by a blind raccoon. It requires a tool, a steady hand, and a tolerance for disappointment. You settle into your trimming stool and get to work. Shave. Turn. Check. Repeat. You are now a human lathe. Your hands move automatically. Meanwhile, your thoughts drift. Did you remember to pay the tithe this week? Is that mold in the corner spreading, or just growing legs? What even is happiness? Then Simon drops something. A bowl. One of the good ones. You freeze. The sound of shattering clay echoes like a funeral bell. You don't speak. You don't scream. You just stare at him until he flees. Evening comes. You fire up the kiln again. Time to glaze fire today's batch. You load them carefully. Every pot is a gamble. Will it crack? Will it blister? Will it fuse into a lumpy abomination that you'll pretend is experimental? You stoke the flames. Hours pass. Night descends. You sit on a stool and stare into the fire. Simon brings you a mug of beer. It's warm. Probably been sitting near the hearth for too long. You drink it anyway. You talk. Not about anything important. Just clay. Weather. That time someone dropped an entire crate of pots into the village well. It was you. Simon asks if you're happy. You lie and say yes. You both sit in silence, watching the glow of the kiln against the dark. Eventually, you douse the fire. The heat lingers. You stumble to bed. Your body aches in places you didn't know you had. You dream of clay. And fire. And a mug that didn't explode. You smile in your sleep. Then the chicken walks across your face again. You wake up in complete darkness. Not because it's the middle of the night, but because someone, probably Simon, stacked firewood too high in front of the window again, and now the single source of light in your hovel has been blocked by a wall of damp logs and poor judgment. You lie there for a moment, blinking at the void. Something smells like goat. That's not a metaphor. You forgot to tether Beatrice last night, and she has taken it upon herself to sleep directly on your chest. She is snoring. You push her off. She farts in protest. You inhale the scent of ancient hay, animal flatulence, and the underlying bass note of mildew that has now fused with your soul. Your body feels like it's been folded into origami shapes by a bitter deity. Every joint creaks. Every muscle whimpers. Your knees whisper threats. You sit up. Your shirt is damp. Your dignity is gone. You are ready to face the day. Breakfast is an oat cake that has the structural integrity of limestone and the flavor profile of punishment. You gnaw on it anyway, staring blankly at the wall while Beatrice eyes your plate with ill intent. There's no tea. No coffee. Just a jug of yesterday's rinse water, which you momentarily consider drinking before deciding you're not that far gone. Yet, you stumble outside to the sound of Simon enthusiastically humming a tune. You do not recognize the melody. You are not convinced it qualifies as music. But you admire his commitment to optimism, in the same way one admires a child trying to fight a bear with a spoon. The kiln is still warm from last night's firing. You approach it like a gambler returning to the roulette table, filled with equal parts hope and shame. You open the hatch. Inside, glowing embers and the faintly judgmental silence of several cooling pots. You do not touch them yet. You've learned your lesson. Instead, you head to the workshop. A customer is coming today. A merchant, no less. which means you must pretend that your workspace is not, in fact, a glorified mud hut held together by desperation and spider webs. You begin cleaning. By cleaning, of course, we mean moving piles of dried clay from one table to another and brushing dust into the air like a chimney sweep with low standards. You find a broken cup from last week, marvel at its flaws, and then, without a second thought, throw it at the wall. It shatters with a satisfying crack. Simon pokes his head in. Was that necessary? You nod. Emotionally, yes. He shrugs and returns to whatever mysterious project he's been working on in the corner, which seems to involve chicken bones, glue, and mild concern. You straighten your display shelf. 2 jugs with floral etchings. 4 bowls with uneven lips. 3 cups that could maybe pass as professional if squinted at in candlelight. And 1 large amphora that took 2 weeks to finish and that you absolutely will never sell but keep around as a silent reminder that once, you made something halfway decent. You hear the clop of hooves outside. The merchant has arrived. His name is Reginald, and he has the kind of smug face only achievable through inherited wealth and a life free of clay exposure. He wears a tunic that has actual colors, which is frankly obscene. He enters your workshop like someone inspecting livestock. He says immediately. You do not say anything. You are conserving energy. Also, you dislike him on sight. He picks up a cup, taps it, sniffs it. Why? You do not know. Perhaps he thinks he can detect quality by scent, like some kind of ceramic sommelier. This one's not bad, he says, as though he's bestowing a royal blessing. You nod, deadpan. It's a cup. He smirks. I need 30. You blink. 30. In 3 weeks. You do the mental math. You will need to make at least 50 to get 30 acceptable ones. Accounting for drying cracks, kiln explosions, glaze defects, and Simon-related disasters. You agree anyway, because you need the coin. He pays half up front, drops the money in your hand like you're a beggar instead of an artisan, and leaves without another word. You stare at the silver in your palm. Shiny, but cursed. Probably. You put it in the tin box under the workbench, next to the 2 buttons, 1 broken tooth, and that time you got paid in fermented beets. Time to work. You and Simon prep clay. You slam it on the board. Knead. Wedge. Fold. Again. Again. And again. It's the same motion over and over, a kind of aggressive yoga for angry craftspeople. Your shoulders are screaming. Your palms feel like rawhide. You load a fresh batch onto the wheel. And begin. Kick. Spin. Shape. Curse. Kick. Spin. Shape. Curse. You are no longer a mun. You are a pottery automaton. A spinning, sweating sculpture of calluses and passive aggression. Simon asks a question. You do not hear it. You're too focused on shaping a perfect curve. Your tongue is sticking out of your mouth. Your back is arched like a dead ferret. You are in the pottery zone. Then your foot slips. The wheel stutters. The pot collapses into itself like a clay souffle. You stare at it. Dead inside. Simon wisely says nothing. You start over. Afternoon becomes evening. You have 6 cups. 4 are passable. 2 are abominations. You let them all dry on the shelf, unsure which will betray you first. You eat your evening meal standing up. It's barley stew. Again. This time with a surprise ingredient, pebble. You chew around it. Your molar protests. You ignore it. Outside, the sky darkens. A cold wind slips through the cracks in the wall. It smells like wet leaves and medieval consequences. Simon cleans the tools while you sit by the fire. You think about the 30 cups you've agreed to make. You think about the fact that your right thumb has gone slightly numb. You think about the concept of hope and how it's really just another word for delayed disappointment. You sip warm beer. It is not good, but it is here. You stare into the flames and watch the shadows move. Then you see it. A cup, from yesterday's batch, has cracked in 2. Silently. Without drama. Just split down the middle like your dreams. You do not cry. You simply place it in the future flower pot pile and keep drinking. Simon joins you. You sit in silence. Both of you tired. Both of you dirty. Both of you, somehow, proud. Because even if no one else sees it, even if Reginald drinks from your cup and doesn't think twice, you know what went into it. The hours. the pain, the moments of beauty. You are a potter. You take dirt and turn it into almost useful objects. And if that's not magic, what is? Night falls. You crawl into bed. The goat is already there. You do not argue. You just sleep. Because tomorrow is cup number 7. You wake up before the sun. Not because you're ambitious, but because the goat sneezed directly into your ear, and the hay mattress beneath you has collapsed into what can only be described as a fungal trench. Your entire body feels like it was gently assaulted by time itself. You shift slightly, and your spine makes a noise like a creaky ship's hull. You lie still and reflect on your life decisions. At some point, you chose clay over any other medieval career. You could have been a thatcher, or a shepherd, or, in a real moment of luxury, a monk with access to dry socks. But no, you chose mud. You sit up. Your blanket, made from a coarse wool so itchy it might be classified as a weapon, falls to the floor. Your toes greet the cold dirt floor like old enemies meeting on a battlefield. You hobble to the door. Outside, darkness still lingers. The world is silent, except for one rooster who, for reasons unknown, screams like he's auditioning for a heavy metal band. You mutter a few curses at him. You've named him Geraldo. You hope he steps on a thistle. You check the kiln first thing. You do this every morning now, like a nervous parent checking if their child has spontaneously combusted overnight. You open the hatch. The heat hits your face. Inside, pots, unbroken. At first glance, you feel the familiar glimmer of joy bubble up, only to squash it back down like you always do. Never celebrate too early. That's how they get you. Simon stumbles out of the side hut, rubbing his eyes. He looks like a confused duckling in a tunic 2 sizes too big. He yawns. You nod silently. Words aren't necessary this early. You're both running on instinct and residual bitterness. Today's task, mugs. Not cups. Not jugs. Mugs. With handles. If you just felt a wave of dread, good. That's accurate. Attaching handles is a delicate art. It involves shaping a small loop of clay, attaching it at the right moisture level, scoring both surfaces, applying slip, pressing it together, and praying with the full sincerity of a desperate mun about to take a math exam with no preparation. If you do it wrong, the handle falls off, or cracks, or slumps like it just gave up on life halfway through the firing. You've lost many mugs this way. Some still haunt you. Simon helps wedge the clay. You start shaping the mugs, big, ugly, wonderful hunks of ceramic joy. Villagers love mugs. It's the closest thing they have to emotional support animals. One for ale, one for soup, one for both at the same time. No rules in the 14th century. The first few mugs come out. Acceptable. Not beautiful, but sturdy. You begin shaping handles. Simon watches, fascinated, as you make one that's just slightly too narrow. You attach it anyway. It looks like a failed pretzel. You sigh. It will be the discount mug. You'll sell it to that one guy in the village who eats grass on purpose. Then it happens. You're smoothing a handle with a damp finger when it snaps off. Clean break. Right in your hand. You stare at it. The rage builds slowly. Simon opens his mouth to speak. You glare at him. He walks away. Smart boy. You discard the broken mug into the pile. The shame pile. It's getting sizable. You work until noon. Your fingers are raw. Your back is writing passive-aggressive poetry in Morse code down your spine. You've got 7 mugs. 4 with decent handles. 3 that look like they were sculpted during a mild earthquake. You pause for food. Lunch today is stale rye bread and something that might be cheese. You're not sure. It smells like ambition and despair. You eat it anyway. At this point, your stomach is basically lined with lead and regrets. You sit by the fire with Simon. He asks if you've ever made anything perfect. You grunt. You've had this conversation before. You tell him perfection is for people with clean fingernails and time to sketch in meadows. Not for people who work with their hands until they bleed. Not for people who barter mugs for onions. You head back to work. The kiln is cool enough now. You begin unloading last night's batch. And the verdict is, 2 small plates survived. Slight warping. Still usable. 1 large bowl cracked. Split clean down the middle like your trust in the weather. 3 jugs came out okay. 1 has glaze bubbles. It'll go to a customer who doesn't ask questions. Overall, a success. You pretend not to be happy. Simon smiles like it's Christmas. You give him one of the good plates as a reward. He looks like you handed him a crown. You don't say anything, but you feel it. That strange pride. That whisper of purpose. You sit back down and begin trimming the mugs from earlier. Carefully, slowly. You shape the bottoms, carve the foot rims, check the balance. Simon asks why it matters. You tell him, because even when no one notices, I will know. He nods like that means something. Later, the village priest stops by. He needs a new wash basin. The old one, made by someone else, you note bitterly, cracked after too much use. You show him one of your larger bowls. He likes it. He pays in fish. You stare at the fish. It is not currency. It is a floppy bribe. But you're hungry, and protein is protein. You take it. Evening sets in. The light turns golden. The shadows stretch. The world smells like smoke, clay, and faint hope. Simon finishes glazing a set of cups. You inspect his work. It's not terrible. A bit uneven. But the ambition is there. You tell him he's improving. He beams like you just knighted him. You drink the rest of the beer. It's warmer now. Slightly sour. Perfectly medieval. Dinner is soup with the mystery fish. You hope it was fresh. You choose not to ask questions. You clean the tools. Wipe the boards. Cover the clay. The workshop falls into silence. You sit by the fire. Simon plays a sad tune on a wooden flute someone traded him for a broken plate. It's off-key, but it's music. You think about the 30 mugs you still owe. You think about how tired you are. You think about how, despite everything, the damp, the blisters, the financial chaos, this is your craft. You made something. Out of mud. And fire. And frustration. You lean back. Close your eyes. Then Simon says, "Tomorrow we try tankards, right?" You groan. Loudly. You wake up to thunder. Not the weather. No. That would be too cinematic. It's Simon. He has dropped an entire shelf of bone-dry clayware on the floor. Again. You don't yell. You don't speak. You simply stare at him with the calm intensity of a man whose soul has left his body and now hovers above the scene with a bottle of ale and a shake of the head. Simon apologizes in the shrill whisper of someone who knows he might not survive breakfast. You look at the carnage. 2 cracked bowls, 1 jug with its spout sheared clean off, and 1 cup that has landed handle first into your porridge. You were saving that porridge. You sigh like a priest at a goat wedding and begin sweeping. Breakfast is now emotionally flavored. After scraping bits of dried oats and ceramic off the bench, you regroup. Today's plan? Tankards. Big ones. With handles strong enough to survive a tavern brawl and rims wide enough to survive medieval dentistry. You know the type, used not only for ale, but as makeshift weapons, currency, or baby baths if things get weird. You wedge clay while trying not to think about the 30 mugs still unfinished. Or the merchant returning in 5 days. Or the fact that your last 3 glazes all came out the color of illness. Simon is shaping small jugs. He hums tunelessly. You briefly consider throwing a sponge at his face. You do not. Character growth. You center your first lump of clay. The wheel spins. Your foot pumps steadily. You become clay. Clay becomes you. The two of you share a deep spiritual connection based on frustration and mutual disrespect. You raise the walls of the tankard. It stands glorious, proud, slightly crooked. Like a war veteran who's had one too many. You slap on a chunky handle. Too chunky. This is less a handle and more a structural liability. You could use it to haul firewood or murder a moderately sized rodent. You remove it and try again. This time, thinner, elegant, almost pretty. It falls off mid-attachment. You mutter words that would get you excommunicated in 6 dioceses. Simon looks over. You okay? You say nothing. Just hold up the failed handle like a sadworm, then toss it behind you. It hits the wall with a splat. He gets the message. By mid-morning, you've made 4 tankards. 1 good. 2 usable. 1 that looks like it was thrown during a sneeze. You keep all 4. Because beggars can't be perfectionists. You prepare for the next step, glaze. Glaze. The deceptive magic of pottery. The last frontier. The final gamble. A process that has ruined more pots and potters than plague and bad knees combined. You mix the ingredients: wood ash, ground sand, powdered lead. Yes, lead. Because in medieval Europe, everything was trying to kill you, even your drinking vessel. You stir the mix with a stick that may once have been a spoon. It bubbles like a witch's brew. You apply it carefully, knowing that too much means drip marks, too little means dull misery. Simon is helping, bless him. He's doing his best, which unfortunately results in a glazed line that looks like it was applied during a small earthquake. You nod at his effort. Internally, you make peace with the idea that at least one of today's tankards will emerge looking like swamp puke. Lunch is soup. Again. This time, there are visible leaves in it. You pretend they're intentional. You pretend you're eating a seasonal blend. You take a moment during lunch to rest your eyes. Bad idea. When you open them, Simon is trying to stack finished mugs on top of wet ones. You lunge like a startled animal and swat the stack apart before gravity can intervene. You don't speak. You just breathe deeply and recite the internal mantra. He is young. He is trying. He will someday understand. Or leave. The afternoon is kiln loading. You arrange the tankards carefully. Handle spacing is critical. Too close and they fuse like sad Siamese twins. Too far and you waste space. And wasted kiln space means wasted firewood. And wasted firewood means chopping more. Which means back pain. Which means rage. You don't need rage. You already have gout. Probably. You seal the kiln. Light the fire. And pray. Not to God. You and God haven't been on speaking terms since that time your best amphora exploded like a clay grenade. No. You pray to the kiln itself. The fire beast. The great bake mouth. The scorching void. Simon lights a second fire beneath the side vents. The smoke rolls. The air fills with the smell of wood, sweat, and risk. You take turns stoking. Hour after hour. Hotter. Hotter still. The sweat clings to your tunic like guilt. You lose feeling in your eyebrows. The goat refuses to come near you. She knows this heat. She respects it. Around dusk, a traveler arrives. A tinker. He's got pans to sell. And, oddly, a lute. He offers to trade 1 tin cup and a dagger for 2 of your crack mugs. You consider it. The cup is dented. The dagger is rusty. You accept. Simon watches in disbelief. Why? He asks. You answer, because someone, somewhere, will think that's a fair deal. And also, I wanted a dagger. You tuck it into your belt like a proud goblin. You will probably never use it. But it's the principle. Evening sets in. You and Simon eat dried fruit and old bread. He plays the lute badly. You don't stop him. You sit on a log near the kiln and stare into the rising smoke. You feel the weight of tomorrow, but also, oddly, a sense of calm. Today, you made tankards. Ugly ones. Functional ones. You may have inhaled some lead. But you did the work. And in the medieval world, that's about as good as it gets. You head to bed. The goat is inside again. She's chewing on a bucket. You let her. You collapse onto your hay pile. It smells like kiln ash and goat dandruff. You sleep anyway. Because tomorrow you unload the kiln. And that is a story all its own. You wake up to the quiet crackle of a dying fire. Not in your kiln. In your back. You shift slightly, and your spine makes a noise not unlike a fork snapping in half. Everything hurts. Everything smells vaguely of scorched wood and goat. Which is odd, because the goat has apparently decided to sleep on your foot. You don't question it. You just sigh. Loudly. Resignedly. The sound of a man whose entire day hinges on whether or not 20 mugs turned into 20 disasters. You get up. Sort of. More like you, tilt upright and regret every second of it. Simon is already outside. He's watching the kiln with the same expression people wear when staring down a wild animal. The kiln is now cool enough to open, theoretically. In practice, it might still bite. You both kneel. You open the front hatch slowly. Inside, the tankards gleam faintly in the morning light. Their glazed surfaces shine with a subdued, slightly homicidal luster. The moment of truth. You remove the first one. Solid. Beautiful. No cracks. handle attached, glaze fully matured. It is, dare you say it, functional. You show it to Simon. He grins like you handed him a puppy. You nod gravely, as if this wasn't a complete miracle. One down. The second is, okay. A small glaze bubble on the side. Usable. Maybe even charming, if you squint. The third? Crack base. You mutter the medieval equivalent of seriously and chuck it into the shame bucket. It lands with a sound like betrayal. You keep unloading. Out of 20, 13 are usable. 6 are flawed but sellable. 1 is now officially a planter. All in all, this is a resounding success. You and Simon sit beside the kiln, eating yesterday's bread and enjoying the rare sensation of not being personally attacked by physics. You even manage a laugh. Until the merchant arrives. And not just any merchant, it's Oswin. Yes, that Oswin. The traveling mug baron of 3 parishes. Wears a red feather in his cap and smells like clove oil and ego. You hate him, but you also need his silver. He walks up like he owns your entire workshop. Which he sort of does, considering he paid for this batch in advance. He looks at the mugs. He picks one up, turns it slowly, squints at the glaze. This one's crooked, he says. You reply, so are most of your teeth. Still works, doesn't it? Simon chokes on his bread. Oswin smirks. Fair point. He starts inspecting the others. You can practically hear the little merchant calculator ticking in his smug little skull. You brace yourself. He finally looks up. I'll take all but these 3. You glance over. Of course. He's rejected the ones with charm. The ones that tell a story. The ones you secretly hoped would find a loving home, with someone who drinks soup out of them while staring into the rain. You nod. You pretend not to care. He hands you a pouch. Silver coins. Real ones. Not I'll pay you next harvest promises. Not fish. Silver. You're temporarily rich. Medieval rich. Which means you can afford some meat. Maybe even new shoes. Something extravagant, like a second blanket. He tips his feathered hat and leaves. Simon asks if you're happy. You think about it. The answer is, kind of. You sold your work. You fed the fire. You didn't burn anything down. And the best part? You still have 3 tankers that no one wanted. Your favorites. You keep one for yourself. It's got a weird twist in the handle. Looks like it had opinions during the drying process. But it holds ale, and that's all you need. You pour a drink. It tastes like victory, wood smoke, and vaguely metallic water drawn from a questionable well. Simon plays the lute again. You don't even mind this time. Later, while cleaning the tools, you reflect on what you've learned. Pottery is 90% failure, 9% success, and 1% pretending you meant to do that. It's dirty. It's thankless. It's absurd. But it's yours. And there's something beautiful in that. You hang the cracked tankards on the wall. A shrine to errors. A gallery of effort. Simon carves his initials into a spare shelf. You let him. You consider teaching him how to throw a bowl tomorrow. A real one. Not the lopsided things he usually makes. You smile. And you don't even notice it. That night, you go to bed with aching hands and a calm mind. The goat is asleep by the fire. The kiln is dark. The mugs are gone. But you're still here. Covered in clay, reeking of smoke, dreaming of slightly better mugs. Because tomorrow, you do it all over again. And that's the routine.